folks, Zach Elliott at Feel Free to Argue. And no, I haven't been vlogging much lately. Still been getting a few new subscribers, so welcome people who've showed up lately. Want to talk a bit this morning about energy, and I want to look at a couple of aspects. First, I want to look at regulatory capture. I want to look at the new bill put out by Kerry Lieberman and why it's a piece of shit. And finally, look at some, kind of the meaningful solutions we should be, looking at. First, I'd like to say that a lot of the problems that we have with these extractive industries that provide our energy have to do with the fact that these industries have captured the regulators who are trying to, or that are supposed to be, keeping tabs on them. If you look at the Massey mine, for example, where they had the coal disaster, that mine had received over 400 violations in the previous year. One of the more interesting aspects of the oil slick was that that particular oil platform, as well as a whole bunch of others later, had received what was called a categorical exemption from doing an environmental impact study. I'm sure that saved them a bundle. Of course, it means they're pretty clueless about trying to assess the environmental impacts of what's going on in the Gulf. And even though this categorical exemption, by the way, the categorical exemptions are given utilizing laws that were designed to cover only the most mundane sort of things, like putting in a nature trail, or putting in a new outhouse at a public park. It wasn't designed for multi-million-dollar facilities drilling deeper than we've ever drilled before. So first of all, it was a complete misapplication of the law. But aside from that, I mean, I think it's very reflective of the effects of constant industry pressure on the regulators that are supposed to regulate them, and the ineffectiveness of even those regulations when they are applied. If you look at the Massey mine disaster, I mean, I think when it gets down to the point of just being a cost of business and them not caring, then the regulations are not having the desired effect, which is to modify the behavior. It's not to make it slightly more expensive to continue the bad behavior, it's to get them to stop the behavior. If it does not get them to stop the behavior, then the fine is not significant enough. It can't just be viewed as like a cost of doing business. And so it has to be viewed as a net loss to the companies over, continuing to violate. Let's look at the new bill from Kerry and famous Republican in hiding Joe Lieberman. First thing you have to recognize about this thing is that it has massive subsidies both for clean coal, that mythical ingredient, and also nuclear. Really bad. Aside from the fact that it proposes drilling in the Arctic shelf, where it would be even much harder to because of environmental conditions, it would be much harder to manage a blowout such as the one that's taking place in the Gulf right now. So you have all of these problems, and the fact that a bill at this point in our history, I mean, it's a significant point in our history. We need something that says that we understand the physics of how our energy needs are affecting the planet. And that's all I can say about this bill, is that it clearly shows that the United States does not understand the physics of how its energy desires are affecting the planet. So, you know, a lot of people say, well, you got to start somewhere. Well, all I have to say is that we really should be starting much closer to our goal than this bill gets us. And I mean, we absolutely should not be giving any money at all to these literally dinosaur technologies, you know, like oil. You know, there should not be 1 drop or 1 ounce of government support for any kind of oil extraction technology, period. There should not be 1 drop of government money for anything related to coal, period. I mean, these need to be treated like the dinosaurs they are, like the pariahs on, you know, our ecology and on our economy that they are. And if we don't do that, if we don't start paying the price that we really should be paying for oil, you know, which means that we're not going to use it very much. If we don't start paying the real price for things like nuclear technology that really reflect the cost, not just of, you know, building a plant and getting it to produce power, but the ongoing costs of like dealing with all the problems that plant creates, both, you know, literally, you know, that you know it's going to create, and, you know, the additional possibility that it may create, you know, a really catastrophic problem. So I think that if we want to have any kind of solution that's really going to be responsive to what the world needs us to do to try to help save large swaths of the world from destruction, what we need to do is we need to change the way that we treat these technologies, and we need to start marginalizing them and having strong economic incentives that will hurt and which will in the short term make these technologies extremely expensive relative to where they are now. Now, I know this is going to place a disproportionate burden on the poor. Well, one of the things that I think we should do to address this is, 1, we should up the fines to an appropriate level for all of these extractive industries. We should tax them heavily, reflecting, you know, their actual cost to society and the environment and the economy. And then we should turn around and take that money and either return it as direct, you know, like tax rebates to people who are poor, or use some of that money and invest it in things that are going to disproportionately help poor people and also directly address the problem. Things like, you know, small, you know, regional power supply systems like, you know, solar power systems, or I think investments in public transportation are another thing that are going to disproportionately help, you know, poor people, since, you know, rich people have their car or can afford a cab or whatever. So when you do that, you know, when you invest in public transportation, for example, you not only directly address the problem of, you know, global warming and adding carbon to the atmosphere, but you also help the people who are being harmed by the increase in costs associated with, like, you know, putting the correct cost on something like oil or coal or nuclear. And that, you know, as the, you know, the people, the conservatives always like to talk about, appropriately incentivizes the system so that people move to the technologies that we want them to develop, namely wind and solar, which don't cause any kind of disasters whatsoever. You know, every once in a while, you know, a windmill falls over or falls apart. I've never heard of a single disaster happening of any kind with solar. So I think it's clear where we should be spending our money. I think if you ask any person on the street, it's clear how we should be spending our money. It's just our stupid fucking government who does not understand, you know, what we should be doing and how we need to address the problem. But unfortunately, you know, the government is a large part of how this problem is going to be dealt with. And so it's going to be dealt with ineptly. And it's not going to be dealt with in the appropriate way. And it's not going to be dealt with in time to save lots of people and lots of species from extinction. And depressing crap like that is why I have not been vlogging. So anyway, this has been Zach Elliott, wishing you a good day as we march gleefully to destruction.